The wind howled across the frozen steppe, carrying a secret older than any empire. Somewhere beyond those endless plains, a child once crawled out of the shadows of death and rose to command the largest land empire in human history. But how did a boy, abandoned and hunted, become the most feared name the world has ever known? His enemies whispered his name with trembling voices. His allies followed him with a loyalty bordering on madness. Centuries later, we still struggle to understand him. Was he a monster driven by bloodlust, or a visionary who reshaped the world? But that's not the most shocking part. Hidden beneath the legends is a story almost no one talks about, a truth buried under conquest, myth, and fear. A truth so strange that even historians hesitate to tell it. Tonight we go back to the fires of the Mongol steppe. We walk into the childhood no one expected to produce a conqueror. And we uncover the choices, betrayals, and scars that forged the man the world would call Genghis Khan. Stay with me, because the story you think you know begins with a secret almost lost to time. Long before the world feared his name, the Mongol steppe was a land ruled by chaos. The horizons stretched endlessly, broken only by rolling hills and jagged mountains that cut the sky like ancient blades. Winters were merciless, summers were scorching, and survival demanded both toughness and cunning. In this harsh world, every tribe fought for pasture, horses, and honor. Life on the steppe moved with the rhythm of hooves. Horses were not tools, they were lifelines. A warrior could ride for days without rest, guided by instinct and the whisper of the wind. But beneath the beauty of the plains lay a violent truth. Tribes rose and fell overnight. Alliances shifted like drifting sand, and loyalty, it lasted only as long as it was useful. At the heart of this unstable world lived a modest clan called the Temüjin. They were respected, but far from powerful. Their leader, Yasuge, was a skilled warrior known for both courage and quick temper. He believed strength was the only law worth following. Yet even he could not imagine how the birth of his son, Temüjin, would ignite a storm across Asia. Temüjin entered a world already trembling on the edge of collapse. Rival tribes plotted against the Temüjin. Old enemies watched closely, waiting for the slightest weakness. And no one expected the child to survive the trials that awaited him. But destiny is cruel, and it often chooses the most unlikely hands to reshape the world. To understand the rise of Genghis Khan, we must understand the world that shaped him. A world where hunger forged warriors, where betrayal was a daily companion, where a child without protection was as good as dead. Yet this same world gave Temüjin something rare: fire, resilience, and an unbreakable will. This was not just a childhood, it was a crucible. And the flames were about to rise. When Yasuge made one fatal decision, one that would doom his family and leave young Temüjin alone against the steppe, everything changed. And that is where the real story begins. Temüjin, world shattered before he turned 10. His father, Yasuge, was poisoned by rivals during a simple meal, leaving the family leaderless and exposed. In the steppe, a clan without a strong protector was a clan marked for death. And within days, the Temüjin allies who once swore loyalty simply walked away. The abandonment was brutal. Warriors took their horses, their weapons, even their food supplies. Temüjin's mother, Helen, stood defiant, holding her children close against the biting wind. But defiance didn't shield them from starvation. Each night they slept with empty stomachs. Each morning they wondered if the next tribe to pass would finish them off. But that was not the worst. A rival family within their own clan refused to let Temüjin grow into a threat. They watched the boy carefully, whispering fears that he might someday reclaim his father's authority. Tension turned to violence. In an act no child could forget, they seized Temüjin, bound him with a wooden slave collar, and forced him into captivity. Imagine the weight of that crude wooden clamp around his neck. Every movement scraped his skin. Every breath reminded him he was no longer free. Nights were the hardest. He lay in the cold dirt, staring at the stars, wondering if the sky would ever belong to him again. But even then, something inside him refused to break. One night, a chance appeared. A god faltered. A moment of distraction opened a narrow path to escape. Temüjin moved with silent desperation, slipping into the darkness with the collar still tugging at his throat. He ran toward the river, plunging into the freezing water, hiding under reeds while his captors screamed his name in rage. No one expected him to survive that night. Yet he did. And that escape marked something deeper, his first real victory. Not on a battlefield, but against fate itself. The boy who was meant to die had learned a powerful lesson. Survival is the first step to conquest. When he returned to his family, everything had changed. The gentle child was gone. In his place stood someone forged by hunger, betrayal, and captivity. Someone who understood the rules of the steppe better than any elder. Alliances were fragile. Power was everything. And anyone could turn on you without warning. Years passed, and Temüjin grew into a determined young man. He gathered loyal friends, forming bonds that would one day become a new kind of brotherhood. But loyalty came at a cost. Rival tribes watched him rise with suspicion. Old enemies whispered that the son of Yasuge was becoming dangerous. Tension spread across the steppe like dry grass before a fire. Temüjin needed allies, and fate led him to one man who would change the course of history: Jamuka, a childhood friend with a noble lineage. Together they dreamed of unity. Together they rode across the plains. But dreams on the steppe rarely survive ambition. Their bond, once strong, would twist into rivalry and eventually war. But no one knew that yet. Not Temüjin, not Jamuka, not the tribes around them. For now, a storm was forming, and every leader felt the pressure. Battles were coming. Betrayals were coming. And the rise of Genghis Khan would require more than courage. It would demand the complete reshaping of an entire world. And soon one event, a kidnapping, a revenge raid, and a desperate rescue would push Temüjin into his first major conflict. A conflict that would set the steppe ablaze. The turning point began with a single act of cruelty. Temüjin's young wife, Bert, his anchor in a world of shifting alliances, was kidnapped by the Merkit tribe in a night raid. They struck fast, vanishing into the darkness before Temüjin could react. For a moment he stood frozen, the cold wind cutting through him, realizing the one person he trusted most had been torn away. But this was not just a kidnapping, it was a challenge. A message. The Merkits believed Temüjin was still the weak, abandoned boy from years before. They expected him to break, to fade back into obscurity. But they had no idea what he had become. Temüjin did something no one expected. He swallowed his pride and sought help. First from Togral, the powerful Genghis Khan, who once swore brotherhood with Yasuge. Then from Jamuka, his childhood friend turned rival in waiting. Both men agreed to ride with him, not out of charity, but because they sensed something growing inside Temüjin. Something dangerous. When their combined forces thundered across the plains, the steppe trembled. Imagine the sound, thousands of hooves pounding like war drums, the cold air filled with dust. Warriors tightened their grips on bows and lances. A rescue mission had become something larger, a declaration. Temüjin was no longer a victim of fate. He was becoming its author. But even then, there was an eerie tension. Jamuka watched Temüjin carefully, sensing a shift in the balance between them. Togral saw a young warrior far more charismatic than he expected. And Temüjin himself felt something he had never felt before: command, power, unity. It was intoxicating and terrifying. The attack on the Merkit camp was swift and brutal. Under cover of dawn, Temüjin's forces struck with precision. Arrows darkened the sky. Horses crashed through wooden barriers. Warriors shouted their war cries into the smoke-filled air. And in the chaos, Temüjin found Bert alive, shaken but unbroken. Their reunion became the spark of a legend, but the victory carried a shadow. Some whispered that Bert was pregnant. Others said the father could be Merkit. And though Temüjin loved her without hesitation, this rumor would follow his family for generations. Even his son Joki, born soon after, would face doubt. This was the moment when Temüjin learned that victory on the battlefield was easier than victory over suspicion and fear. Still, the rescue changed everything. Temüjin's name spread across the plains. Warriors who once ignored him began to pay attention. His reputation grew, and with it, the unease of the tribal elites. The nobles feared him not because of his army, but because of his ideas. He believed in loyalty earned, not inherited, in rank chosen by merit, not birth, in unity built through trust, not bloodline. These beliefs were revolutionary and dangerous for those in power. Then came the moment no one saw coming. A mysterious sign whispered among the tribes. Temüjin had been chosen by the eternal blue sky, a destiny blessed by the heavens themselves. Suddenly, his rise no longer seemed like ambition, it felt inevitable. But destiny is never given freely. It is earned through trials. And the greatest trial of Temüjin's life was still waiting, in the form of his closest friend and future enemy, Genghis. The steppe was about to split in two, and the man who would become Genghis Khan was about to face the betrayal that would define an empire. The war between Temüjin and Genghis tore the steppe apart. Friends chose sides, brothers fought brothers. Entire clans vanished under the fires of shifting loyalties. In the end, the struggle was not simply about power, it was about two visions for the future of the Mongol world. Genghis believed in the old order, ruled by noble blood. Temüjin believed in a new world, where strength and loyalty mattered more than ancestry. The final clash between them was swift, brutal, and heartbreakingly personal. When Genghis was captured, Temüjin did not celebrate. He approached his old friend with quiet footsteps, remembering nights they once spent sharing dreams under the same stars. Genghis asked for a noble death, free from bloodshed. Temüjin granted it, tears hidden behind a commander's calm mask. And just like that, the last piece of the old steppe order faded into silence. But this victory was not the end. It was a beginning. With the tribes finally united, Temüjin called a great Kurultaya council that would reshape history. Leaders from across the plains gathered, unsure of what to expect. They watched as Temüjin stepped forward, hardened by years of betrayal, loss, and relentless ambition. In that moment, the decision felt natural, almost inevitable. They raised him high and proclaimed him Genghis Khan, the universal ruler of all Mongols. The title echoed across the plains like a thunderclap. It was more than a name, it was a promise, a vow to unite the world beyond the horizon. Yet, even then, few understood what that vow would truly mean. Under his leadership, the Mongol nation transformed. Laws were written to protect the weak. Messengers rode across vast distances under the protection of a new code. Trade routes blossomed. Merit outweighed birthright. It was a revolution wrapped in leather armor and carried on horseback, and the world unprepared and divided never saw it coming. But power always carries a heavy cost. Genghis knew the families he conquered would whisper his name with hatred. He knew rivers would run with blood as his armies pushed outward. Yet he believed unity required fear as much as respect. And in a world shattered by constant conflict, many began to wonder if his harsh methods were the only ones capable of forging order. This moment in history forces us to ask uncomfortable questions. Was Genghis Khan a brutal conqueror shaped by a brutal world? Or was he a visionary who understood that peace sometimes emerges only after fire? His actions, controversial and immense, reshaped continents. His empire bridged cultures that had never met, and his vision stretched farther than any ruler before him. One thing is certain, the man who began life as an abandoned child in the snow had now become a figure who would define the fate of nations. His victories were carved into landscapes. His laws endured for generations, and the empire he forged would echo long after his bones returned to the earth. But even at the height of his power, one mystery remained, a question historians still debate. Where would his extraordinary journey finally lead, and what legacy would he leave behind? When Genghis Khan finally disappeared into the vast silence of the steppe, he left behind a mystery as deep as his legend. No one knows where he was buried. No grand tomb, no towering monument, only an unmarked place somewhere beneath the endless grass, hidden by the very people he united. It feels almost poetic, an emperor who conquered half the world chose to vanish like a whisper in the wind. His legacy is a paradox that still challenges us. He brought unimaginable destruction. Yet he also built new paths of trade, culture, and communication. He ruled with iron discipline, Yet he shattered the old hierarchies that chained countless lives. His empire burned brightly, then faded, but the impact never truly disappeared. Even today, borders, economies, and cultures still bear the imprint of his storm. So what should we make of him? Was he a monster forged by a ruthless world? Or a visionary who saw unity where others saw only chaos? Maybe he was both. Maybe he was something else entirely, something we still struggle to understand. His life forces us to confront a profound truth. History is never simple. Greatness and brutality often walk the same path. And perhaps that is why the story of Genghis Khan lingers in our imagination. Because it asks us to look deeper, beyond the blood, beyond the victories, beyond the myths, and consider what a single determined human being can reshape. From a starving boy in the snow to the universal ruler, his journey shows how resilience can carve destiny out of despair. As you leave this story behind, think about the world he changed, and the mysteries he left for us to unravel. What would history look like if one frightened child had not chosen to fight back? And how many destinies even now are waiting to rise from the harshest beginnings? If you enjoyed this journey through history, don't forget to subscribe to History Hub for more cinematic stories. And remember, the past is never silent. It only waits for someone to listen.